Salutations, everyone, and this is my second podcast, going solo again, for no real other reason other than the topic at hand. We are going to be talking about the election, and before you click off, obviously this was in the title of the podcast, so you knew what this was. I get it that either you're tired of this thing, or the fact that this just isn't a subject that people like talking about or hearing about because it makes them uncomfortable. It's very contentious. You know, the things that people say not to bring up in a social setting or at family gatherings or whatever, religion, politics, those are the big heavy hitters. And, you know, we sometimes see the third or fourth subject in there that usually overlaps one of the previous two. But it's such an important subject. Politics is something that I follow myself, and it's a necessity. And I get that you'll have people on both sides that are very annoying, and you may have even stronger negative opinions about one or both of the two sides that we have here in American political discourse. But the fact remains that it's such an important subject. And I know I've seen many polls about why people don't vote. The number one excuse is they don't have the time. And we can talk about at a different time how, you know, the election, which of course is always the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November every 4 years. And this happens to land on the last possible day it could this year, November 8th. Just to make this the longest political cycle possible is sure a bit of a punishment. But the second biggest excuse people have for not voting is they aren't informed enough. And this is definitely understandable, no matter how much you're into politics, or at what level, if you're really interested in local, or if you're really interested in state or national or global. There's always going to be something like, I don't know what the hell Prop 4030 is, or Prop ABCD, or I don't know who's running for, you know, mayor in my town, doesn't really matter, or, you know, the treasury secretary. I totally get all that. But when it comes to things that matter the most, which can be propositions, can be your Senate race or your local congressman, because, you know, those things build up that are very important. Those kinds of things are easier to follow if you just watch or more likely read some of the news, because, you know, as we've known for all of our lives, if we've paid attention, that the news, quote unquote news that we get on television isn't exactly the best filtered, unbiased source. Print news is dying, and the things that we get on TV are rather distorted, and they're going towards the clickbait, because they aren't getting the viewership. People are cutting cable and all that good stuff. Many different factors going into why they aren't doing as well, because we have so many other sources of better media on blog posts or magazines or, you know, webzines or YouTube channels that talk about the news. There's so many more trustworthy outlets out there. But what you have to understand is, yes, you don't like it sometimes when people talk about it. It can be uncomfortable, especially if you don't pay attention, because maybe that'll make you feel inferior, like, oh, I don't know what Aleppo is either, or I don't have a strong stance on this proposition, or I don't like either candidate in this or any race. That's completely understandable, but at the same time, we have to acknowledge that it's important and it is interesting. It really is. When it comes to you know, the big two influences, and obviously they do overlap, the big two influences over every aspect of everything in the entire world are religion and politics. Therefore, they have to be interesting because so much is at stake. So let's get into this election. Now, this will be the third presidential election I will have voted in, and for the third time in a row, the person I will be voting for will not win. I'm not voting for Trump, and I'm not voting for Hillary, so I'll dispel that lack of surprise right out of the gate. Because I feel, as the majority of people do, that neither of them are good candidates. And if you're asking yourself, why couldn't we do better? We must look at the system. If the final two choices are these, Clinton and Trump, then surely the system is broken, and one needn't look very far into the political system to start seeing flaws. And it doesn't start today. It didn't start when the primaries were over. 14% of the American population chose these two final candidates. And whenever throughout this entire section, I don't know how long it's going to be, we are only going to be talking about the election today. And please give me the credence of making one political video every 4 years. I don't think that's asking too much if you are listening or don't like this subject very much, and I haven't talked about it thus far in my almost 6 years here on YouTube because of many of the reasons that I've previously stated. 14% of the American population chose these final two candidates. Don't take my word for it. Anything that I say today, don't take my word for it. Look it up yourself, and you'll see that everything that I am saying is true. But don't take my word for it. Find out for yourself. That's what I encourage everybody to do in every stage of any sort of discourse. So 14% of the American population is to thank for these being our final two choices. Not that 14% voted for either Trump or Clinton, that 14% voted in the primaries. There's something wrong there. The primaries are way more important than the election going on today. Take a look at a restaurant menu. If you had to have a meal, what is more important to you? Choosing what page you get to select from, or choosing between two choices, which could be any of 100 different choices on a giant menu like the Cheesecake Factory or, something like that. Bubba Gump's, something with a huge menu. What's more important? Choosing the page that you get to select your meal from, or getting stuck between two choices, which, if you're most people, you're not going to be a huge fan of either one. You'll choose whichever one is less unfavorable instead of more favorable. When it comes to the presidential election, it's always seems to be the lesser of two evils that we vote for, either because the better person for the job didn't win their party's nomination, or the fact that there were no good choices, which is often the fact. And unfortunately for us, it looks like Hillary Clinton is going to win this election. Not because it's rigged, because that's a hilarious claim to make, because you can't just rig one election. You would have to rig all the elections. You would have to rig the election in every single city in the country to pull that off. And this comes from conspiracy theorists who believe that there are such powerful forces out there that they can control anything, which gives everything in this world way too much credit to think that it has that kind of power. Whether it be the US government or some secret society or some subsect of people, you're giving them way too much credit. But that's how some people view the world, and that's very sad for them, because those people's voices get heard just as much as ours. It's a double-edged sword there. But often the choices are two very bad ones, and that's what we get here. We have Hillary Clinton, who is the second least popular presidential candidate in American history. She's going to win because her opponent is the least liked presidential nominee in American history. These are undisputed facts that we've known for a long time. The polls the numbers don't lie, especially when they keep coming in with the exact same information, over the course of a long time. So obviously, it doesn't matter which party you're on, or if you're not in a party, that we aren't getting a good choice here, because we have the least popular person ever going up against the second least popular person ever. It's a perfect storm for someone as terrible as Hillary or Clinton to win this, because Trump still does, even today, I'm recording this on November 7th, the night before the election, he does have a legitimate chance at winning this thing. And he might even be favored to win tomorrow if he would have just kept his mouth shut and one or two scandals didn't come out. Because every time he says something, people get mad because it's the things that he says. People said they like him because he's unfiltered. He says what he says, and he means what he says. But are you listening to what he's saying? You have an absolute tyrant in the works. The things that he says he's going to do are sometimes unprecedented in American politics. We've seen them happen in other countries, which you can draw your own parallels from. But he also, even if you like the things that he's saying, such as building a wall, it's A, not going to happen, and B, it wouldn't help, because even if immigration is a big issue for yourself, for whatever reason, a wall isn't going to stop the large majority of people. If you have a 50, 90, 10,000 foot wall, all you need is a ladder that's 1 foot taller. Also, most people come through this country not on foot. They come via airplane and they overstay visas. Of course, that kind of stuff does need to be worked on and fixed for a variety of reasons in a variety of situations. But he just says that everything is terrible and I'm going to make it great again. People always seem to get nostalgic, no matter which candidate you like, or if you don't like them, chances are you find yourself magnetized towards one or the other a little bit. Most people get just nostalgic for times that never existed. I'll make America great again, which, presupposes that it was at some time great. He never specifies which time it was great, and whether this was the early 2000s, was it pre 9/11, was it the 90s, 80s, 70s, 60s, 40s, 50s, 30s, 20s? Because he is speaking some rhetoric that we haven't seen in a century of what he says he's going to do and the way he feels about certain groups of people. I mean, you don't have to make things up or insinuate or read between the lines. All you have to do is look at what he says and take it at face value. All the worst things about Trump are things that he himself has said and done. And people on the other side are nostalgic for the Bill Clinton days, as if, he was the magical key to the formula of how the economy worked for a few years. People everyone always thinks that things were better in the past. Guess what? They weren't. They weren't. I don't care what decade or era you're talking about. Things are always getting better for everybody, for every race, for every minority, for every state, for every age group. Things are always getting better. Nothing's ever been perfect for any one group of people or society or another, but things are getting better. Some things have gotten worse, and a lot of things fluctuate, but everyone always seems to pretend that there was a time when things were magical because either they remember it when they were young, when they only understood a few simple, nice things, or it was a time before their own time and they don't want to recognize the absurdities and the nightmares that transpired within those times, of which there will always be many, including this time right now. At some point in the future, people will be like, man, I wish it was the way back then. And we know today things are not perfect. Not to say that they have to be, but there are plenty of injustices and things that need to be changed and things that will be changed, that in the future we'll look back and be like, wow, how were things that bad? How did people believe this? We take a look at slavery nowadays and be like, oh my gosh, that's terrible. Or segregation. We're like, how did anyone think that this was okay? And we're seeing that with the gay movement right now, and it's trending towards the positive direction, but you still have a large portion of the United States, a sizable portion, who are against them living their lives in the way that they want to live them, and some people think that they should die. And this percentage of people will get smaller and smaller because those older people will die, thankfully, and a younger, smarter generation can come up with a more open mind about things, because that's just the way that time works. But we have two terrible, terrible candidates here for president, and I'm not going to be voting for either of them. It's not even a two-party system. People always complain about either their party or the other party, or the fact that it's a two-party system, which, the founding fathers didn't want. Not that it matters what their opinion was. People always love to take quotes for them or pretend to take quotes for them and say that this so-and-so wouldn't have liked this, or so-and-so said this, that they did or they didn't. Doesn't matter. They were dead and old, and they had terrible ideas about some things as well. But they themselves didn't want it to be a two-party system. But it isn't at this point. It's a one-party system. It's a corporate duopoly. They're all part of the money party. If you take a look at the last election, Barack Obama and what was his name? Mitt Romney. You tend to forget the losers of history a little bit. They were basically the same person. They basically had the same ideas. It's like that Futurama skit of, I disagree with everything my opponent says, and the other guy says, I agree with everything he says. They were identical twins, and they were saying the same thing. And it was a perfect caricature of the American politic, both at the time, in the past, current times, and in the future. Look, Hillary used to be a Republican. Trump used to be a Democrat. People change, of course. Their policies will change either to come with the times, which we've seen Hillary flip-flop. She used to hate the gays. Now she says they're great because that's what's popular for the American politic. And Trump has changed his things over the course of the election, as anybody would. We saw the same things with Romney and Obama. Everyone would flip-flop to just try to please everybody. Look, if I say I hate grilled cheese sandwiches to the people who hate grilled cheese sandwiches, they'll like me. And then I say I love grilled cheese sandwiches to the people that love grilled cheese sandwiches, and they'll love me. Maybe somebody will call me out on it, but at least at some point in time, I appealed to both groups, and I'm just trying to hedge my bets. So they're not as common as we had with Romney and Obama, but when it comes down to the president, this is not the most important election, unless Trump wins and he decides to nuke everybody day one, which obviously he wouldn't be able to do, but he can do some damage if he should so choose to do so. But the matter of the fact is, the presidential election isn't the most important one. Congress is more important, and the power that they have, the difference that they can make. And what we've seen, at least throughout my entire lifetime, their inability to do anything. And that's because of the way the political system works at this country at this point in time. So it's not the two-party system's fault. It's a one-party system. They're all part of the same club. They're all part of the establishment. People like to say, oh, Trump's so different. He really isn't. What do you have here with these two candidates? You have a billionaire from New York who is pretending to be richer than he is, and you have a billionaire from New York who pretends to be more from New York than she is. She's from Illinois, and she married a man from the South and pretends that she's a New Yorker and that she's a Cubs fan, even though she wears Yankees hat. She's such a panderer. It's so transparent, this woman, and Trump is just such an insecure person. But we've all heard the arguments against Trump, and he's obviously, if you have any sort of fiber of your being that believes in the decency of humans and want to see the best for people, you cannot even take him seriously as a choice for even the mayor of the population of a town that is just dogs. You can't even trust him with that. And you don't have to take my word for it. You don't have to look at other people's opinions. All you have to do is listen to what he says. He's racist against a large portion of the world and America. He's shown to be racist against blacks. So is Hillary. He's been shown to be racist against Muslims and Mexicans and Jews. He even has a new ad that I just saw today that was attacking the Jews. And once again, don't take my word for it. Everything is out there and everything is on film. That's some of the things that people tend to forget whenever an election happens. They see this 2 or these 12 or these 20 potential candidates for president, and they forget that these people existed before the day that they realized that these people existed. People look at Clinton in this campaign and they tend to forget what happened when she ran last time against Barack Obama. The things that she said about him. This is the woman who played the race card against Barack Obama, and he would attack her on her inexperience and how she shouldn't be unfit. She is unfit for the presidency. And then he goes ahead and makes her Secretary of State. So you can see the hypocrisy there. And then you take a look at Trump, and we have all of this footage from all of these things of him saying things, him doing things, him writing things, or sometimes not writing things, like with his book, The Art of the Deal. People will forget that these people existed beforehand. We have all this mountain of evidence of what they said and done, and the mistake it would be to listen to either of them today and to take them at their word. So obviously I'm not going to be voting for Trump, and I'm not going to be voting for Clinton. And if you're thinking, well, for one, I live in California. It doesn't matter what I vote. It's going to go Democrat anyway. And that is the case in many states. You know, all that matters are a few swing states, and only a few counties in those swing states matter because of gerrymandering and the way that the political process is so twerked and corrupt and mainlined to give the powerful the most power. It's not a surprise the way that it is. We only have a couple 100,000 people that decide who wins the presidency. You know, the Electoral College somehow is still a thing. And if you want to look at the 2000 election as an example of things that you want to avoid, which many people go to, where the person who won the popular vote didn't win the presidential election, which whether you're the guy you wanted to win won or not, you have to admit is absurd that is the case. And if you look at the things that happened in Florida, or the third-party candidate Ralph Nader, people say, don't vote for Gary Johnson or Jill Stein or have a write-in vote for whomever, because the Green Party stole that election. You know, Ralph Nader stole that election for Al Gore. If you look at the exit polling, don't take my word for it. Look it up. Everything is out there. It's free of charge and it's easy to access. If you look at the exit polling from the 2000 election, the majority of people who voted for Ralph Nader, when asked if Nader wasn't a candidate and you had to pick between Gore and Bush, the vast majority of Nader voters said they would have voted for George Bush. So if the Green Party and Ralph Nader weren't in the 2000 election, George Bush would have won by a larger margin than he already did. So the argument against the third party doesn't make sense. People say that it's throwing your vote away. Other people say that if the third parties get more attention and more votes this election, then they'll get more attention and they'll just, you know, it's a positive reinforcement. They'll become a bigger threat. They'll gain more limelight and they'll get more coverage time because, you know, they keep getting more support. So they start having to, you know, cover these other candidates. Those are the two arguments here. Either You have to support them because we can make their voice larger and louder, and eventually they'll be heard, or it's throwing your vote away. Obviously, voting third party, most of the time we don't even have a good candidate in the third party. Sometimes we do, at the very least, have a better than the two same corporate cronies that we get on the second Tuesday after the second Monday. Oh, the first Tuesday, the first Monday in November every 4 years. But sometimes we don't. Regardless, we know a third party is not going to make an impact on this or any election soon. So if you want to vote for Jill Stein, or if you want to vote for Gary Johnson, or write in your vote for Munchakoopa, Yoshisaurus Rex, or Steven Universe, or Lara Croft, you're at your own will to do that. Obviously, it's not going to make an impact, especially if you aren't in a swing county in a swing state. But you never want to look back and say, I settled, or I compromised my own self-worth because of this or that. So obviously there are a lot of problems. And if you pay attention to where the power really is and where the problems stem from many of the things plaguing this country, like kind of like the things that you see on Last Week Tonight, every week you see this huge story about this huge problem and how it needs to be fixed. And whether you were aware of it or not, you're like, wow, this is a bigger problem than I thought, or I didn't know this was such a huge problem. Those kinds of things are possible because of Congress and the lobbying power, the money in politics, religion, or gerrymandering, or the protections that certain corporations or certain groups have in politics or in their power that's unchecked. Those kinds of injustices that you see out there aren't decided on November 8th. So this isn't the most important election. It's not even the most important election when we're talking about presidential candidates, because that happens in the primaries. We had a pretty darn good possible presidential nominee in the primaries, but he didn't end up on top because he wasn't part of the establishment. He wanted to get money out of politics to give us a much more democratic democracy than what we've seen over the past century. But everything was working against him because he wasn't part of the establishment. He wasn't part of the exclusive club. He wasn't a Democrat or a Republican. He didn't owe favors to people, and so he couldn't be controlled. And people who are in power tend to want to stay in power. So, unfortunately, the 14% of the American people who got a say in the primaries, whether it was an open primary, a closed primary, a caucus, that whole system is fucked up as well, along with the Electoral College and the way that things work in a presidential election. All of that is screwed up, obviously. But even though you want to look at things as a lesser of two evils, whether it's this election or the last election or the one before, the one before, the one before, the one before, or the one in 4 years, we can't operate at the capacity that we wish that we could as a free nation. When we are choosing between the lesser of two evils, it is still an evil nonetheless. So we know all the arguments against Trump, and I don't think I have to rehash them. The amount of things that he says he would do, whether he could do them or not, are awful. His terrible temperament. The dude has the tiniest fucking hands in the world, and that drives him crazy. And some of the people that he owes money to overseas, and the things that we don't know about him, are also things that we want to factor into the equation of whether he should be trusted with a number of things, is something that we need to look at. But I think it's plainly clear that this man is not fit for anything. You have somebody who isn't a politician, which many people say they like that about him, that he isn't a politician. Well, guess what? When I go to a restaurant, I want a chef to make my food. When I go to the doctor's office, I want a doctor. When I am voting for a political platform, for a position, I guess what? I want to be voting for a politician. I want someone who knows what they're doing. Often this person, in theory, is someone I'm not going to agree with on some or most things. But at the very least, they might have at least knowledge about their area that they may be looking for some influence for. So when people say, I like him because he's not a politician, that is such a weird fucking argument to make if you really, really look at it. Especially, that may be forgivable if he had amazing ideas or had talents in some things. But we've seen that he doesn't. People say that, oh, he'll make this country great. He's a great businessman. Just take a look at it. Take a look at it. You don't have to take my word for it. He's not a good businessman. He loses money. He's a loser. You don't have to look at Trump University or Trump Steaks. Just look at what he's done with his money. And the fact that he didn't earn it to even begin with. Obviously, Hillary didn't earn her money either. We're not trying to spout that untruth either. But people say that he's a great businessman. Guess what? He isn't. And Bill Clinton wasn't great for our country either. And people thinking that electing Hillary, we get 2 for the price of 1. That's something we've heard at many rallies during the primaries. That, Hillary's great because she's part of the establishment, and Bill will be there, and things were great when he was president, right? Not so much if you actually look at it, because let's face the facts. The president doesn't have as much power as people like to think that they do. Yes, they do have power. They have executive orders and executive power, but they don't have the power that the average American person believes them to have, and the way that we build up this election to be. Yes, it's a position of importance, but they are one part of the 3 branches of government, and guess what? Their part isn't the strongest one. Whomever wins or loses will get the credit or blame for what would have happened anyway. I don't care if it's Clinton or Trump or Obama or Romney or McCain or Bush or Clinton or Carter or Reagan. That's the way the American political system works, and that's the way the economy works. Obviously, they can have influence, and they can do terrible things to our country. They can make good ideas pass through the other branches of government, but they can also fuck things up for the worse in very many aspects. So for those that look back at the Bill Clinton administration, think, he was a great guy. I want a guy in the Oval Office who's so suave he can get a BJ. That's not what happened. We had a liar in the Oval Office, as well as a rapist and a minor war criminal as well. Don't take my word for it, but listen to what I have to say and do your own studies. So let's not forget that during the Clinton administration, that Eric Holder signed off on the pardon of a fugitive who had given a rather large loan that hadn't been repaid by one of Hillary Clinton's brothers, who in turn with the other brother went in on a hazelnut monopoly in the Republic of Georgia, plus donations to the Clinton Library. Rather conspicuous, wouldn't you say? I don't think I have to delve too much into that sentence for you to see where questions may be popping up. And it builds up. It goes on and on. Everybody collects in one way or another. You look at the Clinton Foundation, you look at the Clinton Library, whether it's this year, last year, or 10 or 20 years ago, there is a lot of bought people in the American political system, and none better example than Hillary and her husband. One back isn't scratched without retribution earmarked for the future. It's not subtle. It's not hard to see. These things are done, they aren't done in the dark. We know about them, and somehow everyone either ignores it or pretend it doesn't exist. Nobody is that stupid. You're complicit with corruption, you endorse it with your silence, or even more so, with your explicit support in any way. People have always seemed to think, and we saw this with the last election between Hillary and Barack Obama, that, and even before so when she became a senator, that somehow the American people feel that it would be an insult for Hillary Clinton not to be in a seat of power, that we would be embarrassed as a nation if she didn't somehow have a high power position. People act like we have Mike Trout sitting on the bench, that it's an insult for her not to have a Senate seat for a state that she's not from, and then president for, of course, she had to settle for Secretary of State, and now people feel as though she's due. What she has done, besides be the self-pitying, robotic defendant of a pathological liar, rapist, and minor war criminal, to her credit, she did also take the work of many people over many years that built up a consensus on national health coverage and almost single-handedly pissed all that away. Somehow, that has earned her a Senate seat and then Secretary of State and now president. She had no, and I mean absolutely no foreign policy experience worth mentioning. Her experience went as far as taking money from everyone she and her husband met and to give her brothers anything they wanted. And during the 2012 debates, Obama pretty much said just this, that her experience abroad was nothing more than having a few tea parties. And he was right to say that, and should have gone further to say that she had no foreign policy experience, and that the experience that she has claimed while in Bosnia was fake and fabricated. We know this to be true. Don't take my word for it. It's absolutely out there. Yet nobody likes to challenge the most powerful couple in American political history. And then he goes around and makes her Secretary of State because her main qualification, for whatever reason, is obviously being a friend of Mark Rich. He was right in mocking her for her lack of experience, but being part of the establishment just as much as she is right now. His administration had to find a seat of power for her because he's just a part of the establishment as she is. And reporters called him out on this. Don't take my word for it. Everything for decades has been recorded and cataloged on film, and you can find it without leaving the very website that you're listening to this on. And his response, I get it. You're having fun. That was it. You're having fun calling me out on my hypocrisy, aren't you? I'm paraphrasing, of course, but it shows the reality of how politics work and why it shouldn't be in the way that it does. She has some knowledge on a couple of subjects, such as healthcare, but no real experience worth mentioning to deserve any seat of power. She brags about what she has done, nothing worth mentioning, and what we do remember is pretty bad. During the Clinton administration, when they were finally persuaded to do something about the horror in the Balkans, they delayed it because Hillary said, no, that'll take attention away from my healthcare plan. Don't save this country from being raped. That'll take headlines away from me and what I'm doing. She's always cared and will always care about herself first and her husband second, and that will never change. The scandals about Hillary Clinton, they aren't new. Not new to this year, this campaign cycle, or this millennium. There are about 5 or 6 financial scandals in her past, all related to foreign donors to her and her husband. The reality family in Indonesia, innumerable people connected to businesses in China, which by no means is a country that is on the fringes of the American political system, many of whom fled the country rather than testify into the hearings on Clinton's fundraising. Now, maybe, once again, maybe all this could be deemed okay if it were balanced out by some sort of expertise that she has, of which I cannot think of any besides taking money from Wall Street for what we can assume must be the greatest speeches in human history, or being almost criminally negligent with security of a non-approved private email server. She was found not to have intentionally done this, according to the FBI's investigation, which is once again closed. Just that she was really, really stupid to do so, and we have to wonder which is worse. Remember that this is the woman that played the race card against Barack Obama, and whose people had the media question whether Bernie Sanders is pro-Israel. A Jewish man. Remember what happened during her husband's administration, which many people love to laud for being such a great time in American history. And what she did there was nothing worth mentioning. And what we do remember isn't very supportive of giving her a Senate seat or a Secretary of State or obviously the seat of presidential power. Remember John Kyle, complete neocon, and Henry Kissinger supported her nomination for Secretary of State. Republicans love her. If you're a Democrat and you're pro-Hillary, the Republicans love her. Major Republican establishment backing for years and years. She and Trump were friends. There was a reason she was at his wedding. It wasn't because when Trump says, she had to be, I'm so great and powerful. It's because they were friends. They were friends. That just goes to show what a complete fallacy this feud that they have. Strictly political, because they were good friends, because they were both rich, they were both powerful, and for a brief time, when she decided, hey, I want to be in the Senate. Oh, there's only a seat in New York. Guess what? I'm a New Yorker now. Hey, what's up, Trump? How's it going? This is a great state, right? I love you. We're great friends. She's pro-war and is right of the middle. And when Democrats go right, Republicans go further right. And regardless of how you may feel about her or Trump, that is not a good thing. In 2020, when the next election is, you know what? Let's assume she rules for 8 years, which I think is going to be the case because it's hard to reverse the river once the stream goes one way, especially one with a current this strong, even though she isn't popular and had terrible opposition. Let's assume that she rules for 8 years, or even just these 4. We might get a person worse than Trump to combat her, and someone who's smarter than Trump that won't blow it with footage with Billy Bush or these sex scandals and pedophilic things and ancestral remarks about his daughter and not being able to keep a marriage, let alone a casino running. We might have something worse in our future because of what we have right now with Hillary Clinton. She's establishment. She's part of the club. Trump is not as much so. The Republicans aren't so keen on Trump because of some of the things that he says and the fact that he hasn't been one of them for so long. A lot of people change mostly due to where the money is coming from. That's why lobbyists have jobs. She is part of the club. She has all this money and she got it from a lot of powerful, dangerous people. We need to know what she owes what to whom, and it's scary to think about. We saw that during this political election, just between these two people, that I think I can't remember, it was 14 or 18%. This report just came out a week ago. That let's say it was 18% of the reporting on the final 2 presidential candidates have been about their policies. Only 18% at most have been about the actual policies. Everything has been scandals. Emails. Benghazi. Pussy grabbing. I'm gonna marry her in 10 years. All of this stuff is what's grabbing the limelight, and is one of the reasons why people hate this election so much, is because we have these 2 awful people running. And for all that Hillary Clinton has done for us, she feels that she is owed the presidency. We saw this when she went up against Obama, and a lot of people thought, even myself, before Obama's name was even mentioned, we're screwed. She's going to be the next president because she has the name Clinton. And that carries with it a lot of power and influence and recognition, which makes her easy to elect. We saw that, and then fucking Oprah comes out and says, elect this man, and then we elected Obama. As a nation, I didn't. But she feels that she's owed the presidency. Her life is meaningless if she doesn't become president. It's what she's been working for since her husband got elected. And who could argue with her? Unless you're like me and many others, that people should be distrusted if they're running for therapeutic reasons. She wants to be president, and if for there's a 35.4% chance that Trump wins in 4 years, she'll be back because she feels that this is what she's owed, even though she has done nothing for us. And people love to go with the Bill Clinton argument. Oh, he was so great, and she's part of that dynamic duo of those two. But he wasn't to thank for the economy, and let's not forget, he was impeached and wasn't a very good president. We had a rapist in the Oval Office. Juanita Broaddrick is just one of the women that can plausibly claim that President Bill Clinton raped them. People don't talk about it. They don't bring it up. It's not that it's true or it isn't true that we have a rapist in the Oval Office. It's that it can't be true. Because then what does that say about us? Where does that leave us? And they have no answer for the claims made by Miss Broaddrick every time her story, of which she has no reason to make up, she doesn't gain anything from it, and she wasn't even herself the one that brought it up. It was brought out by other people, and she had to make her story to set it straight because it was getting out. And Bill Clinton refused to comment on it. He won't even deny it, which may not be the best stance for him to make. And people they swept that under the rug at the time, and people love to forget. They absolutely love to forget about the intimidation that was run against all of these women. Much like now that we have all these women going up against Trump. Oh, they're coming out of the woodwork, they want money and attention, even though they aren't getting money and attention. The same thing happened with Bill Clinton. We had the Monica Lewinsky scandal, and he did the same thing that people know that Trump did as well. And Mrs. Clinton may now find it opportune to present herself as a survivor or even a victim, but the facts remain that the hiring of a squalid and unscrupulous Dick Morris as a visor, both at state and national level, was her idea. Mr. Morris has boasted of being a procurer for her husband as part of his package of political skills. The hiring of private detectives for the investigation and defamation of inconvenient women to Bill was her idea. The dubious sense of a powerful law firm as an engine of political patronage was principally her scheme. The firing of a non-client White House staff, the amassing of files on political opponents, and the magical vanishing of reappearance of subpoenaed documents all took place in her wing of the White House and on her apparent instructions. A check for $50,000 written by a donor with intimate ties to Chinese military-industrial complex was hand-delivered to her chief of staff in the White House. On a notable occasion, she herself urged, don't take my word for it, it's all out there, she urged herself to investigative journalists to pursue the rumor that President George Bush had kept a mistress on his payroll. She allowed the exploitation of her own daughter in the crudest and most painful photo ops in living memory. She regarded the allegation of a sexual arrangement with Monica Lewinsky as a proof positive of a vast right-wing conspiracy. She further accused those who pursued that allegation of harboring a prejudice against people from Arkansas, while herself hailing from Illinois, and running a campaign to represent New York. She's a shill of a person, a liar, and the biggest panderer of the world, as we all have seen when she told us to Pokemon Go to the polls. And on a visit to New Zealand, she claimed that she had been named for Sir Edmund Hillary's ascent of Everest, a triumph that occurred some years after her birth and christening, which is an interesting factoid, to say the least. So we know that she'll say anything and do anything because she believes that for some reason she's done so much for us that she is owed the presidency, even though the things that she done during her husband's administration, the lack of experience that she had in foreign policy, and was made Secretary of State anyway, because they're all part of the same club, and they're all billionaires. It was like, oh, Donald Trump's such a down-to-earth guy, he's just like me. Really? A billionaire from New York, a reality TV star who has his own, or had his own beauty pageant, just like you, shits on a gold toilet? I had no idea so many people had so much in common with Donald Trump, and that so many people sympathize with such a woman as Hillary Clinton, and having done the things that she's done. Remember when she was younger and Republican, supporting a nominee that was for segregation and bringing it back. Now, of course, people, kids are young, they make mistakes, people change, they grow up, they mature. I don't know about you. I haven't changed much in my beliefs of races, genders, sexuality since I was 18 or even 16 or even 10. Because while I can't corroborate this myself as a biased witness, I would like to believe I'm a decent person, and I think that all people should be allowed to live a good life and be treated equally and respectively. But we have two candidates who we've shown, who have set themselves on tape all this rhetoric against many races and genders, and then changing things on their religious stances on this or that, or their political stances on this and that. And we have somebody who was for the TPP, Ms. Clinton, and then Bernie Sanders says, I'm against it. And people are like, yeah, good for you, because that's obviously a bad idea for the American people. And she says, like, oh, I'm against it too. Yep. And we know her boy Obama is for it and is trying to get it passed in a lame duck session in Congress. When she gets elected, which she most likely will, she will flip back again, and she will be pro-TPP once again and have another terrible trade deal, as she as we saw with the Panama Papers. What a terrible deal that was for the American people. A deal that she herself, it's all on film, don't take my word for it, was campaigning and championing when her husband was in office. So she's not one to be trusted. Trump is not one to be trusted. And I'm not voting for either of them. Who I'm voting for, in all actuality, obviously it doesn't matter. But what I can say is, my vote doesn't matter. Either as an individual or as a California resident. But it really doesn't matter, because I'm not voting for either of them anyway. So that's just a quick little thing. I realize that some of that stuff may have gone over some people's heads, whether you don't pay attention or have a terrible memory, or have tried to stay away from this election as much as possible. It is understandable, but this is nonetheless important. Even though the lesser of two evils may win this election, it's still not a good thing for you, me, or anybody in the world. She owes a lot of people a lot of money, and we don't know what sort of retribution is in store, whether it's a presidential pardon, a terrible trade deal, or something else. And some of the similar questions can be raised about Mr. Trump as well. But he has words. He has the best words. Just take a look at Bigley. Don't really have to say much more than that. And then we have Dolores Umbridge in physical form here with Miss Hillary Clinton. And unfortunately, this is how democracy dies, with thunderous applause. Hey, we have a woman president. Isn't that great? Nope. Because of who it is. Because of who it is. I don't care what their gender is. I don't even really care if they're 2 feet tall or even human. If I can trust what they say, we can't with this person. I can't trust Hillary as far as I can throw Trump, which isn't very far. And this is the perfect storm. And there's a reason why many people are sick of this presidential cycle and hate it, because there are no reasons to like what has been happening, what has happened, what's happening today, and what will happen for the next 4 or, goodness forbid, 8 years. So yeah, sorry if you didn't like this. Sorry if you don't like light being shed on some things, but I don't compromise the truth for what's popular or trendy or even convenient, for many reasons. But hey, I got nothing to lose, and this is only going to get 30 views anyway because of the subject material. So that was it. Sorry if you didn't enjoy the subject matter, but it's a presidential election, so I feel like I'm owed this every 4 years, even though I could say more, not just today, but other days in the past and the future. But that's not what you come to me for. So if you have any suggestions about what you would like for me to talk about in the next podcast, leave in the comments or tweet at me or say so in the Discord server. So yeah, thank you all for watching. If you liked it, let me know. Either a thumbs up or a thumbs down. That'll let me know. Pretty cut and dry. So yeah, go out and vote. There are other things to vote for other than these 2 terrible human beings.